Caleb Worthy was 37 years old the morning his wife's voice came through his phone, like a confession she had no idea she was making. He was sitting in the cab of his work truck outside a supply house on the east side of Memphis, Tennessee, drinking the last of a gas station coffee when the notification came in. A voice note. No text before it, no greeting, nothing. Just a 2-minute, 47-second audio file from the number he had saved 9 years ago under the name that still made him feel something, Delia. He pressed play. She had meant it for someone named Harmon. That much was clear from the first sentence. She called the person Harmon, described a plan involving a property she said was in her name alone, referenced a timeline of 6 weeks, and used the phrase he has no idea in the way people use it when they feel absolutely certain. She was not absolutely certain. What Delia Worthy had not accounted for, what she could not have known, because she had spent 7 years treating her husband like furniture, was that Caleb Worthy had been keeping a set of records since the beginning of their marriage, the way his mother Vera had taught him to keep any important thing, quietly, completely, and somewhere safe. The voice note was 2 minutes and 47 seconds long. By the time it ended, Caleb had listened to it twice. He set the coffee down on the dashboard. He pulled out the second phone he carried, the one connected to his business lines, the one Delia had seen exactly once in 9 years and had never thought to ask about. And he made a call. What she said on that voice note, what she thought had gone to her divorce attorney, would cost Delia Worthy something she had been building toward for 3 years. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The mornings in Memphis had a particular quality in late October, a kind of gray gold light that came off the Mississippi and settled into the neighborhoods west of the city, like something that had nowhere else to be. Caleb Worthy knew that light the way he knew load-bearing walls, by feel before measurement, because he had spent enough time in its presence to understand how it worked. He was a licensed electrician by trade and the sole owner of a commercial electrical contracting company called Solid Current LLC, which he had incorporated in year 3 of his marriage. Without telling Delia, not from malice, but from the same privacy that had governed his whole approach to the financial architecture of his life. His mother had worked 2 jobs for 14 years after his father left, and she had built a household on one principle: what you build is yours. Keep the deed. Vera Worthy had died of a stroke 2 winters back. He still heard that principle when he walked into a room he owned. He had met Delia Barfield at a church function in 2015. She was finishing a master's degree in urban planning, and she wore her intelligence in a way that Caleb had found immediately arresting, not displayed, just present, the way good wiring ran behind a finished wall. They dated for a year. They married in a ceremony her mother had largely organized and which Caleb had attended as a willing, uncomplaining participant in the way he approached most things, with competence, without complaint. He had been good to her. That was the part he came back to in the months afterward. Not bitterly, but factually, the way an engineer comes back to a calculation that keeps producing the same result. He had been good to her, he had been present and consistent, and, in his way, devoted. And somewhere along the line, he estimated around year 4, based on a pattern of small withdrawals in behavior he had clocked but not confronted, she had decided that his consistency was indistinguishable from his smallness. Her friends had a name for men like Caleb. They called them comfortable. They said it warmly, and they meant it as a verdict. He had a key on his ring that opened a storage unit in Shelby County where he kept the records Vera had told him to keep. Lease agreements, LLC filings, every financial statement from every account in his name, organized in labeled folders in a fireproof box he had added to that box twice a year since 2016. He had never told Delia the key existed. The trouble had not announced itself. That was how he knew it was serious. In September, 6 weeks before the voice note, a contractor he worked with on a commercial renovation project in Midtown had mentioned, in the casual way that people mention things they assume you already know, that he had seen Delia having lunch with a man named Harris Pruitt, a local attorney who handled high-asset divorce cases. He mentioned it the way you mentioned seeing someone's car at the grocery store. Caleb had nodded and said thank you for the information and spent the drive home doing math in his head. He had not said anything. He had simply started listening differently. He played the voice note a third time that evening, alone in the truck, parked in his own driveway while the lights inside the house moved from room to room, the way they did when Delia was doing her nightly routine. Her voice was efficient on the recording. No nervousness, no hesitation. She spoke to the man she thought she was addressing, Harmon, presumably a colleague of Pruitt's or a second attorney she'd engaged for a specific matter, with the confidence of someone who had thought everything through. She said the property on Crestwood Trace was solely hers, purchased before the marriage. She said she had documentation establishing this. She referenced a figure, $94,000, as the starting point for what she called the recovery amount. She said that her husband had no income documentation worth contesting because he worked day jobs and side work, a phrase she delivered with a precision that meant she had actually investigated this and believed it. She said the timeline was 6 weeks and then said, I just need you to confirm the notarized transfer is clean before I file. Harmon, call me back. The message ended. His face remained perfectly calm. She had sent it to his number because Harmon and his contact was one digit apart in her phone, or she had been hurrying, or she had been confident enough in the invisibility of her plan that she had not triple-checked the name before she pressed send. He would never know which. It did not matter. What mattered was the $94,000. What mattered was the phrase, I just need the notarized transfer to be clean. What mattered was that she had said the property on Crestwood Trace was hers alone, when Caleb knew for a fact that it was not. He opened his banking app. He pulled up the account history for the joint account they used for household expenses. He went back 24 months and began screenshotting in 12-month blocks. He forwarded them to his business email. He pulled up a separate account he maintained at a credit union she did not know about and confirmed the balance there, as he did twice a year out of habit. He thought about, Vera, what you build is yours. Keep the deed. He opened the Files app on his business phone and pulled up the scanned copy of the purchase agreement for the property on Crestwood Trace. The property had been purchased 8 months after their wedding. The title held both names. She had signed the document herself, sitting at a dining table in an apartment on Summer Avenue with a pen she had borrowed from him. She was wrong about the documentation. She had been wrong for long enough that she had stopped checking. He forwarded the purchase agreement to his business email. He forwarded it again to a second address only his attorney had access to. Then he opened the voice note one final time and listened to the phrase, he has no idea, and noted, without any particular emotion, that it had been true about many things, but it was not true now. He put the truck in park, gathered his things, and went inside. Delia was in the kitchen, reheating leftovers, her phone face down on the counter. She looked up when he came through the door and asked how the site had gone. He said it had gone well. She said she was thinking of visiting her sister in Nashville that weekend. He said that sounded like a good idea. She handed him a plate, and he thanked her, and they ate dinner at a table in a house that still belonged, legally and in every structural sense, to both of them. He washed his own dish. He went to bed at his usual time. He lay in the dark and listened to the house settle and thought about the storage unit and the fireproof box and every document he had ever put inside it. He was ready before she had started. Simone Okafor had been a commercial real estate and family law attorney for 17 years, and she operated out of a small suite on Poplar Avenue in East Memphis with 2 associates and a paralegal named June, who had been with her since the beginning. Caleb had been referred to her 3 years earlier through a business matter involving the LLC and had kept her on retainer since, quietly the way his mother had always said to keep a good lawyer. Before you need one, not after. He was in her office at 8 in the morning on a Thursday, the voice note already forwarded to her from his business email, with a written transcript he had typed out from memory the night before and confirmed against the recording. She listened to the audio with her eyes closed, which was how she always listened to important things. When it finished, she opened them. You didn't respond to her, she said. No, and she doesn't know you received it. I have no way of knowing that for certain. She hasn't mentioned it. Simone made a note. Okay, the voice note is admissible as a spontaneous recorded communication. She sent it voluntarily to your number. It was not obtained through interception. That matters. She pulled up a screen. Crestwood Trace, walk me through the purchase. He did. He laid out the timeline, the co-signature, the joint title. He watched her read the purchase agreement he had forwarded. She printed it without being asked and set it in a folder. She believes this was pre-marital property, Simone said. She believes it. Someone told her it was, or she convinced herself. A pause. The $94,000 figure, what is that? I believe it's a projected valuation of what she considers her share of the joint assets, excluding the Crestwood property, on the assumption that my business income is informal and unverifiable. Is it verifiable? He slid a second folder across her desk. Inside were 3 years of solid current LLC financial statements, filed tax returns, 2 commercial contracts currently in execution, and a net asset summary prepared by his accountant the previous spring. Simone opened the folder, looked at the first page, and was quiet for a moment. Marcus, she said, then caught herself. Sorry, Caleb. She looked up. The total business valuation here is yes, he said. She set the folder down carefully, the way you set down something that changes a calculation. She thinks she's walking away from a day laborer. That's correct. Some things built quietly built the furthest. All right, Simone said. We have the voice note, the title documentation, the LLC financial record, and we have the transfer she referenced. I want to pull that notarized deed before it completes. Do you know which firm is handling it? I have a name, Pruitt, downtown, and someone named Harmon, I believe a second attorney or a financial consultant. I know Pruitt's shop. She picked up her pen. Give me until Monday. I'll have the deed flagged at the county register, and I'll have a full discovery request ready so that the moment she files, we answer with everything. He stood and shook her hand. One more thing, she said. Your mother taught you to keep records. It was not a question. She did, he said. Tell her she did good, Simone said, and then caught herself again. And he gave her a small nod to say he understood, and she nodded back. And neither of them said anything else about it. His uncle Darnell lived 20 minutes south of Memphis in Olive Branch, Mississippi, in a house he'd owned since the 90s. And he knew Delia's family the way old Memphis knew everybody, through church, through mutual obligation, through the kind of social fabric that connected people even when they would have preferred not to be connected. Caleb drove down on Saturday while Delia was in Nashville. He did not lay the voice note on his uncle's table. He laid only the facts, clean and sequential, the way he would write up a scope of work. Darnell listened from the other side of a Formica kitchen table with a cup of coffee going cold in front of him. He was a quiet man with a wide face and a habit of looking at whatever was on the table between them rather than at whoever was talking. When Caleb finished, Darnell looked up. You know about the account, he said. It was not a question either. Which account? Caleb said carefully. She opened something about 2 years ago, over at that new credit union on Winchester. I know because her cousin Tanya told my wife about it, and my wife mentioned it to me. And I have been sitting on that information, not knowing whether to tell you because it wasn't my business. And then she went ahead and made it everybody's business. He picked up the coffee. I'm sorry I waited. You didn't wait when I needed you, Caleb said. Darnell was quiet then. Your mama would have told her. Back before she passed, Vera would have sat that girl down and told her exactly what she was doing and what it was going to cost her. He shook his head slowly. Some people need to hear the truth, and some people need to experience it. Delia was always the second kind. Caleb drove home with one more piece of the picture in place. Simone's office confirmed on Monday that a separate savings account in Delia's sole name opened 22 months ago at a credit union in Shelby County, held $31,400 in deposits that trace back to incremental transfers from the joint household account, transfers ranging between $800 and $2,200, irregular in timing, regular in pattern. Every transfer had been made on the second and fourth Thursday of each month, which were the days Caleb was reliably on a job site in Bartlett. She had timed it around his schedule. The total was $31,400 over 22 months. By Friday, Simone had the deed flagged, the LLC documentation filed with the court as a marital business asset, and a forensic accounting summary ready. Harris Pruitt's office had made a preliminary contact on Delia's behalf. Simone's office had responded with 38 pages. The picture of Wallace Harmon that had emerged through Gerald Tate's research was not a flattering one. Harmon had structured asset transfers for 3 clients in the past 4 years, all involving similar mechanics. A separate savings account opened during the marriage. Irregular deposits timed around a working spouse's schedule. A proposed deed transfer submitted to the county register at a point in the proceedings calculated to be difficult to reverse quickly. In 2 of the 3 prior cases, the transfers had completed before anyone thought to look. In the 3rd, the opposing attorney had caught it in time but had lacked the documentation to pursue further action. Simone had the documentation. She had built the timeline from the credit union records, the county register requests, and the pattern Gerald Tate had identified across 11 months of transaction history. The numbers were specific, and the sequence was clear. Caleb had looked at Gerald's summary the same way he would have looked at a wiring diagram, methodically, from the source to the terminal point. And what he saw was a system that had been designed to look like nothing while doing something precise. He had left Gerald Tate's summary in the same folder as the voice note recording. He had labeled the folder with a single word, in his own handwriting, in the same way he labeled every important thing he kept: solid. The meeting happened on a Tuesday, 3 weeks before Christmas, in a conference room at Simone's office on Poplar Avenue. The room had large windows that let in a low winter light and a table that seated 8. Caleb arrived early, in his work clothes, canvas jacket, clean boots, a solid current LLC pen in his breast pocket that he set down on the table in front of him and left there. Simone sat to his right. The forensic accountant, a quiet man named Gerald Tate who had worked with Simone for a decade, sat at the end. Delia arrived with Pruitt and a second attorney, the one named Harmon, whose full name turned out to be Wallace Harmon, a financial strategist who specialized in asset restructuring for divorce proceedings. He was a compact man in his 50s who had the manner of someone accustomed to being the smartest person at a table. He was not the smartest person at this table. Delia sat down across from Caleb. She looked at him with the expression she had been wearing since he had come home one evening 2 weeks prior, and she had found in his eyes something she could not interpret and had stopped trying to. She had filed 4 days later. He had been waiting. Simone placed the first document on the table without preamble, the Crestwood Trace property title showing joint ownership established 8 months into the marriage, signed by both parties. She slid copies to Pruitt and Harmon. The property is a marital asset under Tennessee Statute 364121, another document. The solid current LLC filings, articles of organization, 3 years of financial statements, current contract portfolio, and net asset valuation as prepared by a certified accountant, and current as of last spring. She slid it across. The business represents a marital asset given its operation and income contribution during the marriage period in question. Another document, the separate savings account opened 22 months ago at Shelby County Credit Union. Deposits totaling $31,400 transferred from the joint household account in a pattern consistent with deliberate asset separation. Wallace Harmon looked at the LLC valuation summary and was very still. Pruitt leaned toward Delia and said something quietly. She was looking at the solid current paperwork. She looked up at Caleb. "You never said." "No," he said. "You never said any of this." "That's correct." Pruitt put a hand on her arm. She moved her arm away. She said, "I thought you were just—" and then she stopped. She looked at the table. The thing she had thought he was had been the foundation of everything she had built, and the foundation was not what she had measured it to be. Harmon said, in the voice of a man recalculating, "I'd like to request a brief recess to review these materials." Gerald Tate said, from the end of the table and without looking up from his notes, "Of course. The deposit pattern analysis is on page 11, if that would help you orient." Delia's mother, Louise Barfield, had been reached by Simone's paralegal 2 weeks prior regarding the property timeline. She had provided a written statement confirming that she had attended the closing signing on Crestwood Trace herself and that both parties had been present and co-signed. She had submitted it without being asked twice. She had also, separately, stopped returning Delia's calls. Caleb waited through the recess. He drank water from a glass June had brought him. He looked out the window at the winter sky over East Memphis and thought about nothing specific, the way he thought when he was on a job site and everything was going correctly. When they reconvened, Pruitt began outlining a settlement structure. Caleb let Simone handle the response. When it was done, he stood, picked up his pen from the table, cacked it, and returned it to his pocket. He put on his jacket. He thanked Simone and Gerald Tate. He did not look at Harmon. He looked at Delia once, briefly, the way you look at a structure you have finished assessing. Take care of yourself, he said, and he walked out. 8 months had passed, easy and without ceremony. The house on Crestwood Trace had been awarded to Caleb outright in the settlement, given the co-title documentation and the disparity in traced marital contributions. The $31,400 was ordered returned. Harmon's license had been referred to the Tennessee Board of Accountancy for review, given Simone's documented evidence of his prior involvement in a similar asset transfer scheme for a different client in Shelby County 2 years earlier. Pruitt's firm had declined to comment. Delia was living in a rental in Germantown. She had taken a position with a planning consultancy she had known before the marriage, a step sideways technically, though the circumstances that had shaped the step were not things she could explain without explaining everything else. Her social circle, the one that had called Caleb comfortable and meant it warmly, had contracted in the months after the filing. The word had gotten around in the specific way that words do, in a city that is actually a network of smaller communities with long memories. Her cousin Tanya still called. That was something. Caleb was in the workshop he had built off the back of the Crestwood Trace property, a single-car garage-sized space with proper electrical. He had wired it himself, naturally, a work table, and a wall of organized storage that his mother would have called a work of art. He was refinishing a side table he had found at an estate sale in Germantown, sanding in the direction of the grain the way Vera had shown him when he was 9 years old, with a piece of sandpaper folded over a small block of wood. Across the driveway, through the kitchen window, he could see Adrian moving around. She was a nurse practitioner he had met through Darnell's wife in February, a precise woman who asked direct questions and laughed at things that were actually funny. She had come to the house for the first time in March, ostensibly to drop something off for Darnell, and had stayed for 3 hours drinking tea on the back porch and outlining, with considerable specificity, everything that was wrong with how the city handled commercial zoning around hospital districts. Caleb had agreed with most of it and pushed back on 2 points, and she had nodded in a way that meant she respected both. She was making dinner. She had started doing that on Saturdays without announcing it as a thing she was now doing, and Caleb had not announced that he noticed, and the arrangement had continued without either of them needing to give it a name. He set down the sandpaper and looked at the table. The grain was opening up under his hand, the old surface lifting away to show the wood it had always been underneath. His phone buzzed on the workbench. A text from Simone's office, the final settlement transfer had cleared. He read it once, replied with a thank you, and set the phone down. He picked up the sandpaper. Freedom was the real currency. Everything else was just interest. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.